They grew up together in Caraway, Arkansas. Virginia, grandma, was 2 years behind Jerrel in school, but they were in the same school together, and Virginia was actually in Jerrel's brother's class. Through that connection, she met Jerrel. Now, Jerrel didn't finish high school, but instead went off to work. From work, went in to serve in the Army for a period of time. Virginia stayed in school and finished high school, even being named most beautiful in her senior year. So she was quite the catch back then, and what caught the eye of Jerrel. So when he was working and then, kept in touch obviously with his family, with his brother and some of those friends, made the connection with Virginia. And before he joined the Army, they connected, as it were. Both were working at the time, but she stayed back behind in Caraway, Arkansas and worked while he was in the service. And then when he finished his time serving in the Army, he went to work as a grain inspector at the Department of Agriculture and did that until he retired. So served there, I want to say, almost 40 years. And so through that time, grandma would work. She loved working at the fabric store. She loved volunteering her time in all sorts of different ways at church. She taught Bible class for the kids. She worked at the Welcome Center so she could meet new families and meet new people coming to church. She became famous for the cake she would bring to families at every funeral service and every memorial service. She would do the same thing, and she became known as what she did.
In Papa's case, he was, I think, one of 9 kids. And I think he was actually, I want to say he was the oldest and lived the longest as well. Only had 3 kids themselves, but I think both for Grandma and Papa, I think the number one thing they enjoyed doing was having family together. Think about Papa's upbringing with 9 kids. I think that started from the beginning for him and went all the way through. Every holiday, what are we going to do this holiday? It was always, can you come over to our house? Grandma will cook dinner and just wants us all to be in her house. Grandma, I think she was always into the sewing and fabric business. So I remember her working at fabric stores. One of her big hobbies was always making us stuff, having her sewing machine out. She worked at the fabric stores. Papa had many things that he was involved in. I mean, everything from Army in the early days to being an inspector, for the government in the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Spent most of his career in government, working for the U.S. government, whether that be military or other things. He retired fairly early, so 60 or so years old, and from there is really where I remember Papa specifically wanting to be around the kids. He's wanting to help others. He was always the person mowing the lawn at church. He was always the person looking to help out the other one next door, or connections or neighbors, whatever that might be. For Grandma, it's all about family. For Papa, it was all about helping others.
They loved having people in their homes when their kids were growing up. They would have youth group over at their home on Sundays. They raised 3 boys that all attended Southeast, and they just instilled a lot of that desire and willingness to look beyond themselves and get to know other people, get to really find out who people are and meet them where they are, so that they can, you can learn about them, you can learn what their interests are, you can learn about the things that they need. That's one of the things that Grandma in particular loved the most about working at the Welcome Center, was who are the people who are coming to this church. And so that was a role that she loved to play. She loved to play the role of hostess, not just for our family, which she would do every Thanksgiving and every Christmas, but she would play that role in so many different ways in church and in friends and at work. Some of my fondest memories, and I have a great love today of pot roast, particularly on Sundays, because that's what Grandma used to do. And that's what my dad said was sort of the best part of his week. And so anytime that we do that now, I think of Grandma's house and her cooking that roast for us. Her favorite times of year were having family in her house during the holidays. And even when family started moving and living in different places, off to Tyler, off to Dallas, off to Colorado, off to places all around the country, it was very important to her, and so very important to us, that we would gather and be that family that she loved so much.
For Papa, he was always, as everybody knew him as lawnmower man. So he was always the go-to guy, whether that be from his neighbors or people just randomly heard about. So he was always had a full shop at his house. He was always, getting some things sold in our garage sales. and he was always ready and willing to help. One story that really sticks out in my mind is I think he had heard that my brother was having issues with his refrigerator, and come to find out, I think they came home one day, and he was probably in his 70s at that point. Somehow the refrigerator had gotten out of their garage into the back of his truck, and he had it hauled off to go get it fixed. Pretty sure all by himself. He heard there was a problem. He wanted to help get it fixed. Papa, especially, and Grandma too, were all about the kids. I think if you ask my daughter Madeline, she remembers one main thing about Papa, which is that he gave her cookies every time she went over to his house.
There was, there's sort of a running joke as I think about the holidays for our family. We could count on, so when each of the grandkids or great-grandkids were born, Grandma would make us a stocking. I've had the same stocking since I was a couple of months old, since I was born in October. And every year, whether I was 2 years old or 32 years old, every year in that stocking, there would be a pair of socks from Grandma and an apple from Pawpaw. We knew every year. And so we had that growing up. Our kids had that. It was just the tradition. And so we knew that we could count on that. And we'd all sit around together eating apples and telling stories at Christmas time. And then eventually our kids would join in and do that. Just so many great traditions that were developed being a part of that family and being in that house. His way of service was to fix up old lawn equipment, and he became known as the lawnmower guy around the neighborhood. And even in the whole Sagemont community, people would come and just leave and donate lawnmowers or weed eaters or edgers on his lawn, and he would take them and he would fix them up. And sometimes he would sell them if they needed a few bucks for something, but more likely than not, he was just going to give it to somebody who needed one. He would give it to a new family. Our family used a lawnmower for years and years and years that he gave us when we first got married. And that was something that just was his ministry. It was his way of service. It was his way to connect with people in his neighborhood and in his community. I think when we went through their house after they moved into assisted living, there must have been 3 or 4 dozen lawnmowers, weed eaters, edgers, all in various states. People had given him things that he was working on, things that he was doing. So even until 90 plus years old, he was always working, always wanting to do that for other people. The two of them together were just such a loving, inspirational couple, again, to all of us in that family and all of us at the church and everyone that they knew. They had so many great friends, so many great acquaintances, and were just such an example of people that in so many ways are so different. Grandma was very loud, had a big personality, and was someone who loved to be social. Pawpaw was more introverted in that way. He was someone who was more of a behind the scenes type of guy. But the fact they were so different, they showed how strong a love can be when even not everything is the same. Such a loving, inspirational example to so many of us, and really the embodiment of what family should be. When you're a kid growing up, you see a lot of things that your friends have that you really want. And I remember one year in particular, I think Jason was in elementary school. There was a pair of Nike shoes that Jason wanted so badly. And so when his birthday came in August, he was asking his parents, he was asking grandparents, asking anyone that would listen, then he would tell them that he wanted that pair of shoes. Grandma and Pawpaw ended up getting those shoes for him. But they thought, those are some expensive shoes. I'm not sure that, we should be spending that much on one present. So they decided to, in August, give him one shoe for his birthday. And then in Christmas, they gave him the other shoe. And so between, the 4 months in between, he was just eager and waiting and hoping he didn't outgrow the shoes. For Virginia, I would use the words thoughtful, inclusive, loving, interested in all that you're doing, wanted people to feel welcome. Pawpaw was gentle, he was caring, service-oriented, quiet and reserved, but yet very strong in his beliefs and in his convictions, and someone who, without many words, could really lead a family to where it needed to go.
He probably had a bologna sandwich 5 days out of the 7 days of a week for lunch. He was completely happy with that. Family would definitely come to mind. Giving, helpful, sharing. Definitely miss her passion for all of her kids, including my own.
And for Pawpaw, it's a sense of service, a sense of others before myself, always taking care of those and never looking for credit, never looking for reward, never looking for the glory, but always looking to make sure that others' needs were met. He was just an incredible servant. In a way that Grandma was, I want to embody a sense of inclusiveness where there was no one who should be outside the circle. Everyone is a friend of mine. Everyone is a child of God, and we should treat them that way.